started at the beginning of 2020. At that time, some news about a new virus causing pneumonia was found in Wuhan started to come out. But most of people were celebrating the Chinese New Year, the most important festival of a whole year, so they ignored that news. I noticed them because my cousin was working in a bar in Wuhan. But the news also said that the virus won't spread between people and there were only a few cases, so I didn't care so much.
新闻上也没有很在说这个事儿，朋友之间讨论，大家都好像没有很在乎。
从我们医院得到的一种病毒在四处蔓延，我也当时没有什么过于关注。我觉得以现在的科技力量，很快就能扑灭。
There was a news report on the BBC News, but it wasn't a big deal. It was something very small, and they said that some sort of virus had kind of happened in China, and a few people have been infected, maybe 5, and everyone just seemed like it was just something that probably wouldn't affect us.
Everything went on smoothly as usual in January until 22nd. It was all of a sudden that over 500 cases of COVID were reported, and then at the early morning of 23rd, the lockdown in Wuhan was declared, followed by the announcement of other cities locked down. I was in Japan at that time for a holiday, where I was much more safer, but I still felt extremely worried because when I opened the social media, all I can see is statistic of the pandemic. I kept checking on the statistic, hoping it will go down soon, but only to find that it was spreading faster and faster. After a week, I went home. I was extremely, totally shocked or even scared because on my way home, I see hardly not a single car or people opened store. I believe my panic is stronger than most of people because I had a few happy days in Japan seeing people in the crowd walking on the streets and then witnessed the lockdown situation without seeing its process.
我当时就刷着刷着微博，就蹦出来疫情开始扩散的消息了。一上来稍微有一点点恐慌，大概1个周以后吧，开始渐渐不看微博了，因为微博上全都是新冠的消息。
大家一听说封城，就感觉是一个很严重的事情，因为在之前只有北京封城了一次。
当时正在吃年夜饭，在外边饭店吃，吃饭的时候人还非常多，饭店基本上都坐满。看到那个新闻上面就说最近就有一个病毒，然后在蔓延。回家以后了解了一下这方面的情况。以前我们都是晚上习惯去一些庙会啥的去过年嘛，今年就没有出去，已经开始隔离了，相当于。
我的一位老师，他要去武汉参加抗疫的一线战场的时候，我才认识到这场事情的严重性。因为像咱们这些医学不发达的城市都要派医生过去的时候，我就觉得这个疫情开始紧张。
There was signs, but it was all very casual. It was not really it was a very distant thing. At least not a severe problem for us. It was very much seen as like there's this big problem going on in this other country.
Anytime you hear something that could basically shut down like a whole country or stop a lot of things, that's when you start panicking slightly.
When I came home, I was so scared. I thought there were viruses outside everywhere in the air, even if nobody on the streets. I refused to go out in any situation, but only after 3 days, I had to go out and collect our food supplies. Even if I only had to go to the community door, I felt so worried, and I put on 2 pieces of masks, gloves, shoes covers, and even a pair of swimming glasses, like this. I feel it was pretty stupid now, but at that time, the media was only reporting how severe the virus was, how severe the situation was, and asked us to do as much protection as we can.
每天播报的死亡数字和感染人数几乎，尤其是指数增长的，给人带来的恐慌。不应该只宣传它对人到底造成了什么样的危害，更应该注重宣传的是我们如何科学的预防它。
It was also quite hard to get daily supplies. Only one person in one family could go 1 time per day in my city. And there were securities at all the doors in our communities to make sure nobody breaks that rule. And what's worse, all the stores except the big supermarkets were closed, and almost all the masks were sold out. The food we got was from my father's friend's company, and the mask we used was bought from Japan. We bought 10 boxes like this.
像超市这种下午关门特别早，小吃摊儿还有菜市什么的，基本上就全部关掉了。公交线路甚至都关了1个星期多吧。
小区一共有几个出口，他把那些出口都封了，只留了最后一个出口，设了围栏，设了保安。进出的时候要测体温，然后要登记，外来人员不许入内，没有什么不便。而我觉得自己的人身安全都有保障了。
就到一般都是以一个村一个村为管理单位的，两个村之间就会用木板或者用砖块做墙，把所有的出口封掉，只留一个主出口，每天有人在那里把守。
有一些长期慢性病的患者，他需要长期在医院待着，可惜疫情期间就得回家。有些人就像我们一个普普通通的2级医院，都有好多病人因此耽误了。当时有一个原发性肝癌的患者来我们医院查的时候，当时疫情特别严，任何患者查之前必须先做好核酸检测，还有咽拭子检测。因为这个又耽误了1-2天，然后又去不了北京，后续可能就是在肝病科住了2天。然后当时如果是说他能迅速的进医院，核酸结果当天迅速出来，然后马上转移北京的话，可能会有救吧。
那个时候口罩一般好一点的防护等级基本上都已经卖没了吧，就包括普通的医疗口罩，可能在网上也会卖得很贵。
很多人会炒口罩那个现象，那时候当时还挺常见的。
我住在超市后面的一个小区里，但是呢，去超市那条路被封死了，挺麻烦的。整个街区人员的进出是有限制的，必须是有什么事情才能出去。比如说上班，当初我爷爷和我奶奶住在另外一个街区，就我们想着给他们送点吃的什么之类的，我们完全进入不了他们的街区，就只能他们在这个街区的出口那儿等着我们，我们把东西交给工作人员，然后工作人员再给他们。
不方便出去的是统一采购，方便出去的好像是2天也不知道3天，每家每户只能派1人出去采购物资，通过主出口到主干道上要去大型的超市。但是平常的菜市场都关了。
我也有朋友在武汉嘛，他们那边经历的一些事情要比我们想象当中的严重很多，他们可能食物都有短缺的困难。
10分我觉得能打个8-9分吧，政府也好，医院也好，采取的措施我感觉都很快速也很有效。我觉得是不是有点过了？因为已经疫情控制住了，所以说觉得是有点没必要。但是自己想想，可能这是以防万一吧，说不定会有反弹什么的。
北京因为它是全国的一个中心的地方，所以它防疫的一些措施，我觉得算做的是比较好的，比较到位。
是很有效的，但是稍微的严苛了一点。
There were totally only 17 cases reported in my city, but the street, which was really busy beside my room, was kept empty for at least 2 weeks. And only after 6 days, no cases reported in our city, I finally saw some booths selling fruits appeared on the street. Then I started to counting people walking on the street, because I haven't seen anybody except my family members for too long.
我整整1个月没有离开楼道，就是时间长了之后，精神上会有一点不适。
在家待了2到3周吧，觉得外面很危险。
2月份、3月份，好像都没出过门，最多下楼转一圈，然后散散步，然后锻炼一下，一般就回来了。
从大年初2往后走整整半个月时间没有出门，其实也是一个作为医护人员的一个自觉，我要为大众树立一个榜样。
Finally, at around March, the cases in the whole country were going down, so that our life started to come back to normal. But March was also a time when the UK pandemic started.
There was a story about a guy who'd come over from China to go to France. He then infected 7 other people, and those 7 other people then came back to the UK. That was just the tip of the iceberg. So very quickly after that, within a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks, it suddenly started, like pockets all over the UK were popping up, and that's when we were all a bit like, oh no, this has actually become a big deal.
I remember I was at work, and then next thing you know, we all had to go home, and my pub was getting closed down. It was a bit scary, and it was just confusing because it just felt like it all came at once.
I decided myself to come home from university. The numbers are rising, people are dying, and I don't want to be trapped to university for it, so I was like, I'm going to go home now.
Half of it was concern. We were a bit like, wow, this is serious now, you know, people are locking out. And half of it was kind of weirdly excited about, like, what happens now? You know, we can't go out, we can't go to work, we can't do all the other things we used to do. We got bored quite quickly and we adapted.
I was really miserable in lockdown because I couldn't see my friends, I didn't know when it was going to end, I had to finish my degree.
I was just happy to not be at work. And I have quite a big family, we all live together, so it was quite nice to just all be at home together because it wasn't so negative. Like, there was positives to it as well.
My mum was the one that was doing all the shopping. She said that she did have trouble, like there were queues outside of Tesco. She was really struggling to get a slot for her online orders.
Every week there was a different shortage. So yeah, getting like basics was really hard for the first few weeks because everyone was like stocking it up.
We didn't go out at all. Like, we stayed at home a lot. The only times we would go for walks, but we would wait until it would be quieter, so we'd wait until it would be later evening so we wouldn't encounter anybody.
We didn't really go out. We have a dog, so she needed to be walked. So we would go for walks, but we would just like go to this woods where you just never bumped into anyone.
The longest I stayed in was probably a month, but I couldn't take it. When you're accustomed to a certain lifestyle and then you're suddenly thrown into you can't do anything, that's very, very difficult to kind of adjust to.
They should have called the first lockdown way sooner. They didn't close the borders, which is why we've got loads of different variants.
I think it should have come in earlier. I think definitely those like 2 weeks before it came in, we all knew what was going on, we all knew what was happening, we all knew it was going to be a thing, like it was going to be massive.
Although the situation in general had got better, there were still error outbreaks happening occasionally. The Chinese government's attitude towards these error outbreaks was clear, which means a whole district would be in a full lockdown until there was not a single case. A city announced they were in war stage only because of one case. In some places, some really bad thing happened, like the securities blocked people's doors to prevent them from going out. Also, the rules of these area lockdowns were really strict, even far more stricter than the national lockdown.
不是9例就是10几例吧，它不是在市区，它是在邢台的县里，就是离市中心很远。如果一个人他检查出来有问题了，就看你的密切接触者有哪些，就推导出来是怎么样传过去的。我昨天刚做完2轮的核酸检，全市都要做。小区医院里派的人，然后在小区里给我们做。生活的影响就是被幽闭在小区里，不能出门。去年的话是可以出小区的，现在不是了。现在你要出小区的话，是你得提前去公安局申请出入证。我们家只有我爸爸可以出去，因为我爸爸是医生。
如果是那个新冠肺炎的患者，他们做深度 CT 嘛，到我们科里边检查以后，他们根据这个报告，它属于一个局地的一个小爆发，很快能控制住。
您觉得这次这种防控的措施，包括说这么严格的隔离和全员的核酸检测是必要的？
我觉得是必要，能快速的切断传播途径。
我觉得虽然它这个有非常不合理的地方，但是没有更好的方法了。
Pandemic was controlled efficiently after the first lockdown in UK, and I was supposed to go to UK for my postgraduate study in September, but I and my family members all thought that the situation was still not safe enough and it could get better. Therefore, I chose stay and take online courses. However, soon the situation got much worse. The virus was spreading fastly again, and the speed was even higher than that in April. After a month, I lost the hope that the pandemic could be controlled in a short term, and I couldn't stand the time difference no more. Therefore, I regarded the vaccine, which was not popularized, as a new hope.
I think they should have just kept it on lockdown until they felt that the cases were completely down before allowing us out.
Easing the first lockdown was a huge mistake. Doing the help out to eat out to help out was a huge mistake and actually probably killed thousands of people.
We didn't really achieve a great deal maybe with the lockdown because it came too late and got lifted too early maybe. Some of the things they brought in seemed quite ridiculous, like the 10 p.m. curfew. Like COVID just didn't exist before 10 and suddenly it all came out. And that was so bad because it just pushed everyone into a smaller space of time.
疫情非常严重，到处都是病毒，去了就能感染。我带了半箱子的口罩、手套、消毒的东西。
家里人有的是不太想让我来的，觉得这边疫情比较严重，但是我实在是害怕，因为做不了实验影响我的成绩之类的，我还是过来了。
就感觉挺严重的，但是它已经是在最严重的时候了。我过去1年之内肯定能治好。我在国内想等打了疫苗再出去，这样比较安全。
At the end of November, I found a place to took my 2 doses and then stepped on my journey to UK. There are hardly cases now, but everyone still likes to wear a mask. The international area is almost empty. Such a big place, hardly anyone else. It's so strange. Some people are wearing protection suits. Just like we are doctors and are going to fight the pandemic. Actually, nobody here now. So I decided to take this glasses off. The airport is empty, almost like in China, but the stores are still open. Finally, Birmingham airport, like before, almost empty. It's really an unpleasant journey. The information I got from Chinese media was that UK was suffering, people were dying, and still no one obeyed the rules. People still gathered on the street. Therefore, my impression for UK was COVID hell.
他们首先也有严格的防疫措施，但是我有点不太理解为什么他们就觉得好像没那么严重。
他们这个做法有点太负责任，一方面对自己的安全并没有很在意，另一方面感染人数可能会更加的恶化。
I have had people that have been the opposite end where they've been like, I'm not going to break the rules, and if anybody else breaks the rules, how dare they? And then I've had people that have been like, oh, nah, I'm not going to follow the rules at all. I have maintained them quite well, but there have been times where I've been like, that's a bit silly, so I am going to break that rule.
My family and friends are really good. Like, we all follow the protocol. I know like a lot of people are kind of still pushing those boundaries and potentially not wearing masks in shops and stuff because they have that option. You know, the government has given them that option.
But when I arrived, I found there were only a little people walking on the streets, some of whom were wearing masks, which gave me a little comfort. And then I found that even in self-isolation, I could still go out for buying daily supplies or even a little walk. It made me feel a lot better because in China, isolation means you can't go out anyway. However, when I see someone not wearing a mask walking on the street, I would still walk away and feel a little panic.
刚来的时候，这边有些人随便出入，有些还不戴口罩，就觉得很惊讶、很震惊。没想到英国有这么多人不相信这个病毒的可怕性。
90%的人在那个时候会觉得是一种不以为然的感觉， 戴口罩这件事情，它不仅是保护自己，也是保护他人。
Most people I have seen are wearing masks, even like in London on the underground. I just personally didn't enjoy wearing them, to be fair. It's not good. I'd get really bad headaches from it. I wore it for work because we had to, it was compulsory.
I remember I was wearing masks from the start of the pandemic, like going to the shops. It was mostly from my dad, who obviously works from the NHS. It does limit what you're breathing onto. I think it must have definitely helped. Wearing a mask for half an hour in the shop is not going to hurt me in any way, but it might help me, or it might help other people.
Perhaps influenced by the Chinese friends who were not so afraid of COVID, I became brave after self-isolation. Finally, inspired by the festival atmosphere and the end of lockdown, I decided to take a risk and go to London to celebrate the Christmas, even if the number of cases took flight at that period.
I feel really unsafe and nervous now. Too many people, and they're not wearing masks. My friends took their masks off for better photos. I don't think it's good.
Luckily, I and my friends were all safe after the day.
那时候可能想到自己打了疫苗，天不怕地不怕，也没有 lockdown 嘛，就觉得去应该没事。当时是觉得人这么多，还有很多人不戴口罩，觉得真恐怖、真危险，赶快把自己保护好。但是后面因为自己回来后也没有出现身体不舒服的情况，所以也没有很担心。
However, that Christmas was really a disaster for UK. Too many people got infected.
My mum had it around Christmas. We just all isolated together and no one else got it in the house.
I had it over Christmas actually. I lost my taste and my smell on Christmas Day. You just chew things. If you think about it for a second, you're like, no, I'm not tasting anything, and you start to overthink the textures of food so much more. It's very odd. I just stayed in my home. I never had any breathing issues. It's just really hard to do anything. Like our bodies just felt so achy and heavy, and muscles like achy. You just didn't really want to do anything.
In England, we must therefore go into a national lockdown which is tough enough to contain this variant. That means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home.
To be honest, I don't think some of the lockdown rules were really working. I remember touring restrictions saying that don't travel unless you have to. But when I took on trains just for touring, no one stopped me and asked me anything. And we could see signs saying wear a mask, if you don't you could be fined for thousands. Actually, I've seen a lot of people broke that rule, but I've never heard someone who really got fined.
Just a way to scare us. It's not actually compulsory. Well, to be honest, it never really was.
I think it's more of a threat than actually happened.
只是说说而已的，很多细致的地方它落实不好，比如让你别出门也没人管你。
Like small little punishments, but enforced them more often, and like made sure that they were actually being enforced.
If the cases rises even more, or maybe there's a new variant or something, then I would say, okay, maybe they might have to enforce in the rules a bit more. But even that is going to have to be to a certain extent so that it doesn't violate our human rights, like, so that we can also have a decision.
There's a limit to the kind of things you can do to make people do stuff. Even if we were very harsh with fines and even prison terms, and there will always be people who just don't want to.
So if they were going to take measures to enforce the public to follow the rules, I think actually you've got to start with yourselves, because you've probably broken the rules far more than some members of the public.
Strict enough or not, the third lockdown really did its job. The reported number of cases and deaths went down for several months. But the lockdown was not the only thing that helped. The more benefiting thing was the popularizing vaccine. Although I had my 2 doses of vaccine in China, I still had another dose as a boost at the end of June. I suffered from fever on that day, but only one day after, I totally came back to normal.
I've had both my vaccines. Everyone I know, most of us have had some sort of fever and a bit of aching. Nobody's had anything terrible.
Both vaccines actually. I had a bit of side effects the first week or so, but after that I was fine.
接种2针，只有胳膊痛，痛了3、4天，长出一口气，我是有衣服穿的人了。
No, I've heard loads of stories about like blood clots and people passing away or just being really ill. If we get to the point where we kind of have to have one to get on with life, then of course.
Once you start forcing anything, it's a dangerous road. You can open the floodgates to another thing, and I'm not saying that people who don't have it and the stances that they're saying and the reasons are right or wrong. I just think like they don't want to do it, fine. I think that you should have it if you can have it. I know that there are some people that don't, and I don't really agree with them, but I don't think they should be like forced. If you don't have the vaccine, you have to pay.
I'm a big advocate for vaccines. I think we should have vaccines. But to be forced to have a vaccine, I think that's different. It's more about education and knowledge. Just giving people the science and the data and saying, look, this is the proof that we have.
However, knowing I'm safe enough now, I still didn't make any shift on my daily protection. I would still wear my masks and sanitize my hands frequently whenever I go out. It seems that those protective acts had already become my habits.
For example, say you forgot your mask and you were like, oh, I just need to pop in the shop and get something. I think now I have a double vaccine, I'm a little bit more like, that'll be okay, like I'm only 5 minutes.
就还是正常戴口罩消毒，没戴口罩，但简直感觉自己就是又回到裸奔状态了。
I still like wearing my mask and sanitize everywhere I go. It's sort of become second nature, really.
Our reception sent us an email informing that there was a positive case in my floor in July. I never felt I was so close to COVID. I knew even if I caught it, I would be fine because of the vaccine. I still did a lot of exaggerated protections. I planned not to go out for a few days and bought a lot of food. I would wear my masks and sanitize my hands, even if going to my neighbor. It's a little funny for me to record it now, but I still can't make sure what would I do if that thing happens again.
我周围有一个同学有过感染，心理上非常恐惧，吓了10天没敢出门，直接去录4饼了自测包，然后买了一大堆东西，关了10天，哪也没去。
出门就会变得更加小心，口罩戴在病里面是一点，然后减少出门次数。
还是心里很害怕，所以就算出去遛个弯，我也会戴上防护等级最高的口罩。
I think I just carry on doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't stop going out. I would just be extra careful. I'd be like hand sanitizer. Maybe don't touch too many things.
Leave them food outside their room and leave them nice things that they could enjoy, but without touching or seeing them. You're meant to isolate away from people, like I don't really want to catch it.
From the beginning of June, the case numbers started rising quickly again because of the Euro finals and the lifting of the lockdown rules. And the trend still didn't change now. Seeing the rising speed of number, I started to feel worried again before, but now I won't have this thought because the number of deaths and people in hospital are still in a lower level. The thought I have now is I may catch it, people may catch it, but it's not that dangerous anymore. We are on the way of making it like a normal flu, and just not long before, I went to join the crowd in London again. Crowd I'm in is even larger than that in Christmas, but now I'm no longer feeling that dangerous.
I think it is getting better now, but recently it was really bad. So it definitely goes like this. I think it will continue to go like that.
现在是好多了，可能感染了，但是大家还是会痊愈的。像一开始死亡率还是挺高的。
肯定是有的，现在至少重症和死亡率都大大下降。
Seeing as there's a lot more people out and about, the cases must be at a good enough level.
If they're really, really high, then we definitely need tighter restrictions. I don't know if we could do a full lockdown again, but if that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. I don't think they ever would do another lockdown. I think they're very set on their path of just kind of living this new normal, dealing with the situation.
I'm not sure, like, will we go back into another lockdown? One day there was rules, there was masks, there was social distancing, and then as soon as it hit midnight, all of that was gone. So if it can change that quickly, there's nothing stopping it from going backwards.
We're in the living with it one. I can't see it changing. Maybe that is just the way to keep going now. Those restrictions should have stayed in place for longer periods of time instead of being like, this week shops open, this week this happens.
我觉得还是可以先把疫苗的普及率打上来，然后再跟他学会共存。你不能一味的 lock down，因为它确实会影响别人的生活。
它虽然达到群体免疫，但是它每个月它还是会有很多死亡的病例。这些人，我觉得是在他们所谓的共同免疫当中被舍掉的那一部分。
Taking precautions like the distance rule or face mask, that's more realistic, whereas just shutting down everything and telling everybody to go indoors, this virus is literally going to take control of our lives then. That means we'll never do anything.
我们毕竟想象不到它到底会导致什么，所以我觉得现在还是处于一个比较警惕的状态，是非常正确的。
I don't think this will ever go away. I don't think we'll ever really go back to normal. But it's how we adapt to how the virus adapts.
My first thought about this film was finding some reason causing the different attitudes between Chinese and British towards COVID. However, I learned a lot during the filming stage, talking and observing. We are not so different. We all have panic facing this unknown threat. We all felt bad during lockdown, and we all don't want to get infected. There will always be exceptions, and people's mind would be strongly affected by their tradition and culture, but it's still unfair to judge people's attitudes by their nationality, like a Chinese must have a lot of panic and the British must pay less attention. The process of making this film has now become my personal journey, recognizing and correcting the misunderstanding and prejudice I had before. We might have our own different thoughts and our own best way to deal with the pandemic facing such a huge global problem. But before we judge or deny, I think a good thing we could do is communicate and understand.